Hey kids, let's gather around for the story of the Declaration of Independence. One day, a guy named Thomas Jefferson got an idea because he wanted America to be a brand new country all its own. So he sat down one day and he wrote the Declaration of Independence. Yeah, and then he showed that writing to some other men who were around then, and they said, "Yeah, we like this. This is a great idea. So give that over to me." And John Hancock and some other guys got together on July 4th and they signed it with their big signatures, and that's the way America got to be independent. Yeah, no, not so much. That's the little myth, the very basic elementary school story. But of course, as you've noticed in this class, things are usually more complicated. So let's go back a bit in 1776, just for some context. It's one of our favorite words. So in that period right there with the bar there, ever since the previous summer, actually ever since 1775, you'd had the militia, those unprofessional soldiers, and then this new army of sort of professionals, led by George Washington, are surrounding the world troops in Boston. How long are they going to be there? Well, also, since January, this book, Common Sense, has rocked the colonies. So this is that whole first couple months of 1776. You've got sort of a standstill in Boston, question marks. What's going to happen? And then Thomas, P to the A to the I to the N to the E. Don't forget the last letter there. Thomas Paine had written that book, and that's getting more popularity. So there's sort of a standstill there. Finally, though, on March 17th, that ends at the very end of the winter. Some new cannons get brought in by a guy named Henry Knox. And that's a pretty cool story, how he gets these cannons from a fort way over in Canada, drags it across some sleds and things all the way over from Canada to Boston, and scares the British away. There was no battle, but George Washington and his new friend Henry Knox get a lot of the credit here. Without a battle, they got the British away to, well, no one really knows. They think they're probably in Canada. That turns out to actually be true. So for the next few months here in 1776, G. Washington is leading his army to New York City to defend that city. They figure that's where the British will come back to. They won't come back to where those cannons are in Boston, so they go to New York. And all those things turn out to be true. Here we are. You may already remember this one. The very middle of the year, Royal Navy ships start arriving off Manhattan. So that's the context. That's all what's going on, sort of military and sort of politically. You have this Common Sense book that we'll come back to, and some other ideas around. So that's what's going on in 1776. Just real quick here on New York City. The actual city of New York is right there where you see the words New York. But you might not know about all the islands and all the water around it. I'll take another sort of zoom in here. This is what Manhattan was like at that time, and zoom in a little bit more here. So you see all that red down there, that's at the very bottom. That's the only area that was really settled. All that green and even the brown, that's like farmlands in 1770s. New York was not what it is today. And if I put this side by side with New York right now, and you can even pause this if you're curious to sort of line things up. But really, it's just like the very tip of Manhattan, the financial district, maybe a little bit of Chinatown, little Italy that's settled now is all that was really settled then. So there's a lot of open space to have to control. So that's all what's going on. Let's go back to the Continental Congress for this story here. So that was, again, the context, the Congress. So about a month before the famous dates that you know about, in this whole context here of what's going on in New York and with Common Sense going around, a congressman named Richard Henry Lee, who you've probably never heard of before, he's one of the members of that Continental Congress. And he says, let's just get right to it, guys. Let's have a real vote on independence. So this actually comes from a Virginian, someone from Virginia. So what happens then, though, because there's some disagreements, and you already know maybe a bit about that, I hope. So for most of June, while other things are getting done in Congress, a small group of congressmen, members of that Congress, drafted. And you know probably most of these names right here. These are some major names of American history here. So it's not just one person. It's really a group project, actually. But I've bolted out Thomas Jefferson because he ends up getting most of the work assigned to him. And that's what sometimes happens, isn't it, with group projects, as you may well be aware from having done some yourselves. So he does most of the work, and then they get together. And one of the other videos in this page here, you get a little bit more insight into how that goes. On July 2nd, 2nd is the day when Congress meets again. They've seen a bit of the draft of it. They've had some chances to think about it. Every colony except New York. Why not New York? I bet you can figure that out from the context of what's going on before. And some other colonies are still very nervous about it, but do end up choosing to vote for independence. So it's the 2 days later, in those 2 days, the 2nd, the 3rd, and a bit of the 4th, that a lot of revising goes on to that document. So some work had been done in the group already, but some things get taken out, including one part that Thomas Jefferson really put in there that was about slavery, blaming King George for the fact that America had slavery. Historians now think that's kind of an odd thing to have put in there, but it would be a very different document if it did have something specifically against slavery. Anyway, July 4th is the date that the vote happened to approve the document. But that's still not the day that it gets signed. That's actually August 2nd. Psst, that's my birthday. By fun coincidence. August 2nd is when the members who were in Congress, and actually some of them had already gone home by then, and so they sign a printed copy, and that's the famous one that we've seen. And Timothy Matlack is the man who should get credit for that. So it's not Thomas Jefferson's handwriting that we see on that document. But there, I can give you a link for if you want to see what Thomas Jefferson's draft actually did look like, if you want more of the story. But I'm going to end it here. So your job is to put all this together into a decent paragraph of some kind, putting together the details that I've just given to you here, plus maybe some other sources that you're going to have to. Bye.